Hi, Nigel back with the carrying on the countdown of the top 64 albums of mine, and we're just outside the top 20 this week, so going to count 25 through 21, and then we're into the top 20 in the last 20 days before the big day. Um, bit of a treat here because I've got five albums from four different decades. So those people saying, "Oh, stuck in the 70s, and that's the only thing you know." And in fact, what I've got here is quite a sort of freaky collection of different styles. I'm probably not the ones you're used to on 25 through 21. So I'm going to start with number 20. Where are we? 25. Yeah. Um, you will be sick of this woman by now, Joni Mitchell. And in 1970, I think I've said this before, she released Woodstock. Also, Big Yellow Taxi was out around the same time. And she burst on the scene as she'd been going for a couple of years before this, but sort of burst into the sort of pop charts, that sort of thing, around the early 70s. Um, in the mid 70s, I'd not really got any of her records at the time, but I was tempted by something I saw in a local uh, record store in Sheffield, and it was this album. Whoa, let's get it in. It's called "The Hissing of Summer Lawns" by Joni Mitchell, and this is my choice for number 26. Um, I like the cover. It was embossed. I might just pick up this embossed cover for you, see if you could see that. Most of Joni Mitchell's covers are painted or drawn by herself anyway. She's an artist. The other thing I was intrigued by was this little cut on the sleeve edge, and I thought, well, maybe that's why it's cheap. I don't know how much it was back in the day, but it seemed pretty cheap for an album. I've since learned, of course, that means it's been imported from the States, so no big deal there. But yeah, great album, great artwork, and very dense to get into, and that was a problem. I would say if you're going to get into Joni Mitchell, especially after you've heard me rattling on about her all this time, I wouldn't start with this one. I would start with a number of other ones, two of which we've covered already. But I tend to start with this one because I bought a cheap album. Um, I would say that it's one of her best now, looking back, but terribly dense to get into. Inside the sleeve, and I'm not sure I can show you this before the 9 o'clock watershed. There's a picture of Joni Mitchell there, and it actually says this is an album you're supposed to listen to it as a whole. The whole unfolded like a mystery, and it's not my intention to unravel that mystery for anyone. And I certainly think, having listened to this many times since, it is still a mystery. A lot of stuff we're not quite sure what she's talking about. A lot of it's in the third person, so she's observing stuff that she sees in her life and commentating almost about what's going on, mostly in California. So she also says that, I'm contrasting the straight lines of the architecture with the curved lines of the I don't know what they are, the guys from the jungle carrying a snake. She calls about it. One of the tracks called the Jungle Line, which is explains some of this stuff, and all sorts of use the word juxtapositions, but sort of contrast between what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, what people say they do and what they actually do, etc. They've got a song here about a priest who portrays one life he lives and actually lives another one. Opening track on Francais Kiss in Main Street, which is a just complete contrast to what she's been brought up to in Canada, and how interesting and stuff these tracks are. So that's this great album. As I say, don't start here. I'm trying to look what else I've written here. Yeah, but fantastic album. My standout track is probably going to be the title track in the hissing of Summer Lawns. And it's because it evokes this sort of feeling of the album. A lot of jazzy feel into it, just getting into the jazz ideas. She got Larry Carlton on rhythm guitar and lead guitar sometimes. She got Robin Ford on a couple of tracks on guitar. So any of those people into blues guitar know how useful that guy is on guitar. So Joni Mitchell, Hissing of Summer Lawns, 1975, from her heyday. Um, Next artist I'm going to talk to you about is my favourite artist of the 80s. I think we talked about the Smiths earlier on, about 2 or 3 episodes ago. This guy was with a group, his own group, and since went solo, but he's come back with some of these musicians as well since. We're talking about a guy called Elvis Costello, and I was mad on him. I had all his albums up to about 1995. Couldn't get enough of him. 12-inch singles, the whole thing. And it was because, one of these post-punk bands, my views on punk anyway, but then post-punk we got some people who could play and who could write lyrics and could put a song together, and I think Costello was certainly of that ilk. A lot of production was done by Nick Lowe, and he used to really get the feel of the attractions at the best. So you've got Elvis Costello, lead vocal, rhythm guitar. You've got Steve Naive on keyboard, I guess you'd call it, and a guy called Bruce Thomas on bass. They sort of fell out. Him and Elvis Costello fell out about 10 years in, which I think was the start of the end for the attractions and Elvis Costello in general. Fantastic bass player. And Pete Thomas on drums, great drummer, underestimated drummer. And for those following the Sheffield theme here, this guy was born in Hillsborough, Sheffield. Great drummer. So, fantastic band, and I could choose, any number of Elvis Costello albums. From the first one, My Aim Is True, one of my daughters named after Alison, which is one of the standout tracks on that album. You've got Armed Forces. You've got what else we're going to write here? Trust, Imperial Bedroom. Some great albums. But the one I'm going to choose is probably not the most popular of his albums, but this one here, and to me epitomised the way he found it effortless. The band found it effortless to bang out 20 songs. A couple of famous ones on here. Can't Stand Up for Falling Down, Love for Tender, New Amsterdam, High Fidelity, those sorts of things. But there are 20 tracks, and as you put jokingly on the cover here, 20 hits. Nick Lowe also goes out of his way. The producers say that most people say you can't have the quality of a record, a vinyl record, with 20 tracks on the album. Let's just disprove that. So, and it's a great sounding album. And High Fidelity, the track High Fidelity just about summed it up. So in my eyes, couldn't put a foot wrong at this time. Tracks of no more than 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes duration. Elvis Costello and the Attractions up there, most powerful. 1980, so 5 years on from the Joni Mitchell album. And if you want to start anywhere with Elvis Costello prior to 1985, I think you wouldn't put a foot wrong if you like the guy. There you go. Thirdly, I'm going to choose album I've only got on CD, so I'll show you that CD in a moment. But you remember a few selections ago, I told you about my mum buying me a jazz album called The Sidewinder by Lee Morgan, and that was about the only jazz album I had until I sort of started digging back in the 90s about what is it with jazz, what it is about some of the stuff we hear on films and radio and TV is so memorable and so puts you in the mood to go back to this time, and the key one and the one that I think any if you talk to anybody who's into jazz and say where should I start with a jazz album, they probably say, well, this is the album. And this Kind of Blue by Miles Davis comes out as the top album. Maybe Time Out is another one, but this is the top album, and Miles Davis often cited as the top jazz musician. You will not go wrong with this album. If you've heard it, you'll know how good it is. If you've not heard it, then you've only got so many years left to pick this up and listen to it before you go. There's only about 8 tracks on this. First track, the standout track for me, is one called So What, and it's that smoky jazz club mood all about it. But it sort of never stops, never lets you down. Always just moving on. He's always surrounded by fantastic jazz musicians. Everybody wants to play with Miles Davis in his group, and so creme de la creme. Top album, best jazz album of all time. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. 1959, by the way, so we go into the 1950s with this particular selection. Okay, another one I've only got on CD, so I'll hold that up in a minute. Oh, if I hold it up now, this is a guy called Nick Drake, and I got into Nick Drake fairly late. Showed you LP, Island sampler album last week, and oops, yeah, the Nick Drake was on that album. Although I never sort of got into it, it seemed a bit mellow and a bit folky for me at the time. But Nick Drake, absolutely phenomenal artist. Only really became famous after his death. And spookily, there's a track, I think it's on this album, called Fruit Tree, which to me is all about, when I die, I'm going to be more famous than I am now. He died at 26 years old, allegedly took his own life taking antidepressants. But it was always that sort of solo, shy as hell sort of guy who just wanted to play his own music. It's said that, well, he did go to Cambridge University, but it's said that when he was giving up his degree, much to his father's disgust, to take up music, people didn't think he'd ever make it because he was so shy. He used to turn his back on the audience and play his acoustic guitar with his back to the audience. Yeah, so that's a crippling start to start off with. The Five Leaves Left is an interesting thing as well, and I didn't quite know what it meant. It was all about, maybe it was all about the autumn leaves and all this sort of thing. It's actually about Rizla packets, so those people who roll their own cigs will already be ahead of me when you've only got 5 papers left. There, I don't know if there used to be or there still is a little reminder, so you've only got 5 leaves left, so get into that. Turned out that everybody smoked something back in the day. This is 1969, yeah, 69 from memory. An absolutely amazing album. My standout track is called Riverman, allegedly written when he was at Cambridge because there's so many sort of the Cam flows through the town centre and it's written about him, by him. He only released 3 albums. There was a few posthumous releases of his work and lesser known tracks, all that sort of thing. But this one, he released something called Brighter Later, also another fantastic album, and one called Pink Moon, which gets a bit dark, the 3rd album, and a bit more jazzy and a bit more avant-garde. The story is that he was so disenchanted with the music business by the 3rd album that he just took all the music, all the tapes and everything to the Island Records, dumped it on the secretary's desk and said, there you go. And shortly after that, passed away. So yeah, sad story, really got famous after his demise. And more recently, I guess, some of his stuff's in movies and soundtracks and that sort of thing. But if you ever want a mellow but intense, deep record, I think I would start with 5 Leaves Left and certainly go for Brighter Later if you like the sound of it. So that's number 22, and I've got one left, one album left, which again didn't get until about 10 years ago when I'm thinking, well, hang on, I've got to get this because so many people talk about this album. So many guitarists talk about this album. Anybody from Peter Green to Eric Clapton, any blues guitarist will tell you that this is a game changer, as they call it nowadays. And I'm talking about the late, great B.B. King. So this is B.B. King live at the Regal. Actually, this is a repress. I bought this in Paris one year when it just sat there at $9.99. I thought I've got to have that in euros, about £7. Brand new re-release. This was released in 1964, and this is B.B. King at his best, live on stage at the Regal in Chicago. And the whole thing is just like so natural, and yet, when you read about these artists who played in the 50s and 60s, these blues musicians, they would do the same act maybe twice a day, maybe 3 times a day, in all the clubs up and down the States. So he probably played this set about 300 times. He probably told the same stories about 300 times. But if you listen to the album, you'll know that he makes it seem real and for the first time on every take. And there is a lot of talk in between all the tracks. And they kept that in because it's really the hallmark of B.B. King to connect with the audience and to say this is coming up and that's coming up and we're going to take you back. he says, going to take you way back and play one of the old stuff. I hope you're okay. And the audience are just in his pocket. It's absolutely marvellous recording. 30 seconds in, we're into Every Day I Have the Blues, and 30 seconds in, we have this guitar. His guitar's called Lucille. It's a handmade Gibson, shaped like a 335, but without any F holes. So those who know the guitar will know that he's going for a open body guitar, but without an open body. So absolutely amazing. Big story about Lucille. He named her after a woman he met who I think dragged him out of something to do with a fire. Oh no, it was a fight over Lucille that started a fire. That's not the guitar, the woman. So he named his guitar after her. Favourite track on this, my standout track, is called Sweet Little Angel, and again you'll have heard this track for sure. But I mean, so many of these fantastic songs, and so many guitarists, blues guitarists, and even modern day guitarists say B.B. King best ever, and he was known as the king of the blues. So you can't really go far wrong with that sort of thing. So yeah, lots talking in between the tracks, but real spiel as I call it, and absolutely adds a lot to the album. B.B. King, Live at the Regal, 1964. I think I missed one standout track from Costello's Getting Happy album, and the one I missed out was Temptation, so my favourite track. But there are so many on this, so many favourite tracks on there. Okay, so that's it. Into the top 20 next time we meet, so in 5 days' time we'll do the top 20. I'll do the 5 count down to the 10th album, and then I'm going to decide whether I'm going to do 2 at a time or 1 at a time, but probably 2 or 3 at a time until we get to the top 5. Hopefully you're still finding it interesting. I'll see quite a few people logging on, having a look at it, and quite a few people giving me feedback, so I hope it's bringing you some joy. And see you next time. Bye for now.